You know T-Rex, or at least you know the movie version. A giant roaring lizard with tiny useless arms, constantly showing its teeth like it just discovered protein powder. Basically every dinosaur documentary for the last 30 years has convinced people this thing was just a giant, scaly murder machine. The problem? Almost everything about that image is outdated, because over the last few years, scientists have basically been patch-noting T-Rex nonstop. One study says it may have had lips, another says it may have had feathers, another completely changes how fast it could run. At this point, T-Rex has gotten more redesigns than Minecraft textures, and honestly, the real animal may have been even stranger than the movie monster. Yeah, we're starting with this one, because this discovery emotionally damaged half the internet. For decades, people imagined T-Rex with giant crocodile-style teeth sticking out 24/7, and to be fair, it looks awesome. But there's a problem. Crocodiles can get away with exposed teeth because they spend most of their lives in water. Their teeth stay hydrated. T-Rex, not exactly. This thing lived mostly on land, meaning if its teeth were constantly exposed, they'd dry out and weaken over time, which is bad news when your entire hunting strategy depends on turning bones into powder. So now, many scientists think T-Rex may have actually had lips covering its teeth. Not human lips, obviously. That would look absolutely cursed. More like giant reptile lips, similar to monitor lizards. And somehow, that version might actually be scarier, because instead of constantly roaring, it probably looked more like a giant silent predator, judging everything around it, which honestly feels way more intimidating. Poor T-Rex arms. These things have become the punching bag of evolution. People talk about them like they were completely useless. But here's the thing. Those tiny arms were ridiculously muscular, like absurdly muscular. Each arm may have been capable of lifting hundreds of pounds, which means T-Rex technically had stronger arms than basically everyone watching this video. And unlike human arms, these things were almost entirely muscle, no wasted space. And just compact prehistoric violence. Scientists still argue about what they were actually used for. Maybe gripping prey, maybe helping the dinosaur stand up, maybe holding struggling animals during bites. Nobody knows for sure. But useless? Definitely not. Also, the claws alone were around the size of kitchen knives, so honestly, even T-Rex's weakest body part could still ruin your afternoon. You know that famous line, don't move. It can't see you if you don't move. Yeah, that's almost definitely nonsense. T-Rex actually had incredible vision. Its eyes faced forward, giving it strong depth perception similar to modern birds of prey. Some studies even suggest its eyesight may have been better than a hawk's, meaning if you tried the whole stand still strategy, congratulations, you'd still get eaten very efficiently. And honestly, that makes way more sense, because evolution usually doesn't turn apex predators into giant, legally blind tanks, especially not ones trying to catch fast-moving prey. So no, standing still would not save you. If anything, T-Rex would probably just stare at you in confusion before eating you anyway. Here's something people rarely talk about. Teenage T-Rex were terrifying in a completely different way than adults. Adult tyrannosaurs were built like tanks, massive heads, heavy bodies, bone-crushing bites. But younger T-Rex? They were faster, slimmer, longer-legged. Basically, the sports car version of T-Rex. Scientists think juveniles may have hunted differently from adults entirely, which creates a horrifying mental image. Imagine an ecosystem where the adults are giant walking crushers, and the teenagers are high-speed pursuit predators. That's not a food chain anymore. That's a difficulty setting. Now this part absolutely lives up to the hype. T-Rex had one of the strongest bites in Earth's history. We're talking thousands of pounds of pressure, enough to crush bone like crackers. And unlike modern predators, T-Rex didn't avoid bones. It ate them. We literally know this because scientists found fossilized T-Rex poop filled with crushed bone fragments, which is disgusting, but scientifically very helpful. Its teeth were also built differently from most meat eaters. Instead of thin slicing blades, T-Rex teeth were thick, heavy, and incredibly durable. Basically, giant serrated bananas of death, designed less for slicing meat and more for deleting entire sections of animal. Okay, this is where dinosaur fans start fighting in the comments, because yes, there's a chance T-Rex had feathers, at least partially, not giant bird wings. Relax, more like patches of fuzz, especially when younger. We already know many close relatives of T-Rex had feathers, which means feathers were definitely somewhere in the family tree. The real debate is whether adult T-Rex kept them. Some scientists think large adults were mostly scaly because giant animals overheat easily. Others think certain areas still had fuzz. And honestly, a fluffy T-Rex somehow feels both adorable and deeply threatening at the same time, like a homicidal chicken from another dimension. Okay, this next discovery is where things start becoming slightly unhinged, because scientists found something weird on multiple T-Rex fossils. Bite marks, not just random scratches either. Actual Tyrannosaurus bite marks, made by other tyrannosaurs. And some of these wounds healed, meaning the dinosaurs survived the attacks. Which tells us two things. First, T-Rex absolutely fought each other. Second, those fights were horrifying. Imagine two animals the size of buses trying to bite each other's skulls off. That's not a fight anymore. That's a natural disaster. But it gets worse. Some fossils show bite marks on bones that were clearly eaten after death, meaning T-Rex may have also scavenged, or straight up eaten, other T-Rex. Yep, cannibalism. The King of Dinosaurs apparently looked at another T-Rex and thought, free protein, nature is beautiful. If seeing T-Rex wasn't bad enough, smelling one probably meant your day was already over, because tyrannosaurs may have had one of the strongest senses of smell ever evolved by a land predator. Scientists figured this out by studying the part of the brain connected to smell, and it was huge. Like, suspiciously huge. Modern vultures can smell dead animals from miles away. Bears can track scents days old. Now imagine combining that with a 40-foot predator that can crush bone. That's basically what smaller dinosaurs were dealing with. And honestly, this may explain why scavenging was so important for T-Rex. Because if something died nearby, T-Rex probably knew almost immediately, which means somewhere in prehistoric North America, there was probably a T-Rex following the smell of dead animals like a giant murderous bloodhound. Absolutely terrifying. Baby T-Rex honestly looked like an entirely different animal. People usually imagine tiny versions of adults, like a miniature murder lizard. But juvenile tyrannosaurs were weirdly different. They had longer legs, slimmer bodies, smaller heads, and possibly fuzz or feathers. Basically imagine a giant angry roadrunner. And because they were lighter, young T-Rex were probably much faster too. This creates a really interesting possibility. Instead of competing with adults, young T-Rex may have hunted completely different prey, meaning one species basically occupied different ecological roles depending on age. Baby, fast hunter. Teenager, pursuit predator. Adult, bone-crushing tank. It's like evolution kept upgrading the same character build every few years. Now obviously, everyone talks about the bite, but honestly, the neck may have been just as ridiculous. T-Rex had massive neck muscles designed to support one of the largest skulls ever evolved by a land predator. Its head alone was around 5 feet long. That's bigger than some entire humans. And all that weight needed support, so the neck became this giant muscle-powered battering ram. Scientists think T-Rex may have used powerful head jerks while biting, meaning it didn't just bite prey, it bit, and then violently ripped chunks away, which is somehow even more horrifying. Imagine getting attacked by something whose face weighs more than a motorcycle. That's basically what herbivores were dealing with. Now this part hurts some people emotionally, because despite being called the King of Dinosaurs, T-Rex may not have actually been the biggest meat eater ever. Dinosaurs like Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus may have been longer, especially Spinosaurus, which looked like someone genetically modified a crocodile using nightmares. But here's the thing, T-Rex wasn't built for length, it was built for raw power. Spinosaurus was more specialized for fishing. Giganotosaurus was slimmer. Meanwhile, T-Rex looked like evolution accidentally built a tank with teeth. Shorter, maybe, but massively heavier, and honestly, probably scarier, because this thing wasn't built to chase, it was built to dominate. One of the most famous T-Rex fossils ever found is named Sue, and honestly, her skeleton looks less like a fossil remains and more like a medical horror story. Broken ribs, massive infections, damaged bones, arthritis, even holes in the jaw. This animal got absolutely demolished throughout its life and somehow survived. That's the insane part. Most predators today would die from injuries like these, but Sue kept going long enough to grow old, which tells us something important. T-Rex wasn't just powerful, it was unbelievably durable. This thing lived an extremely violent life and still kept surviving, which honestly makes it feel less like an animal and more like a prehistoric boss fight. And here's the funniest part of all this. T-Rex keeps changing. Every few years, scientists discover something new, and suddenly, boom, another redesign, new skull shape, new feather theories, new muscle reconstructions, new walking posture. And honestly, that's a good thing, because science isn't about pretending protecting old ideas. It's about constantly improving them, which means the T-Rex you know today might look outdated again in another 10 years. And somewhere right now, there's probably a fossil sitting underground waiting to completely change everything again. So, everything we know about T-Rex is wrong, or at least incomplete. Because the more scientists study this animal, the stranger it becomes. Not just a giant roaring movie monster, but a real predator. Fast, intelligent, powerful, and honestly, far more complicated than people imagined. A creature that survived one of the most brutal ecosystems in Earth's history for millions of years. And somehow, even after 66 million years, we're still arguing about what it actually looked like. Which honestly might be the coolest part, because every fossil we find adds another tiny piece to the puzzle, and somewhere out there, there's probably another discovery waiting to completely rewrite T-Rex all over again.